What are some of the specific things that were restored to the earth through the prophet Joseph Smith?
Well, the restoration initiated with the first vision. I think you had another quote.
Yeah, so this is from Elder Dyer in a talk he gave, I believe 1956, somewhere in there, called A New Dispensation. He says, upon this occasion, God the Father, speaking of the first vision that we label it in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, upon this occasion, God the Father and his beloved Son, Jesus Christ, appearing as glorified, resurrected beings unto a chosen servant of God, made known once again the state of immortality, which man will attain in preparation for the next estate of eternity, that also the world once again could know the reality of the personal nature of God the Father and his beloved Son. This simple yet profound understanding, God the Father and Jesus Christ are two separate yet unified beings.
Glorified, resurrected beings.
Glorified, resurrected beings. God is not some ambivalent construct that you cannot understand or approach. God is your literal Father. He is as a man, as Moses teaches us. He is perfect in all things, but he is understandable. He understands us. He knows what we're going through. He is keenly and acutely aware of the trials and the difficulties we suffer and we face. He sent his literal Son, who obtained a mortal body in this life and during his mortal ministry, but then qualified for and obtained a celestial or a perfect body, but yet a body still in our likeness. We are made in his image. This is not some figurative verbiage that the Lord uses. It is literal. We are made in his image. We look like him. We work like him. And if we allow it, we can be like him in all things. But the first vision ultimately restored the most fundamental and most basic yet most important gospel truth, that God the Father is our literal Father. He's an understandable, knowing being that we would recognize and that we will recognize when we see him face to face, as other prophets have done throughout the dispensations, and take comfort in knowing that you are made of stuff to become like him. That's not blasphemy. That's the culmination of the perfect love and strength of the Father and the Son.
The whole purpose of Jesus Christ's life and example is to teach and show that man can become like God. Man, in his perfection, can become exalted and like God. Jesus Christ was a man. He was born. Mm-hmm. He was perfect, and he was exalted and became like God. The first vision reveals the true nature of God, that glorified, resurrected beings, and that Jesus Christ literally became the same as the Father. And that means that through his atonement and through repentance and the doctrine of Christ, through his sacrifice, salvation, and merits, we also can attain the same. Not because of our worthiness, but through his worthiness.
And that's exactly where I was going to go, is if the atonement of Jesus Christ is truly eternal, infinite, and has no limits and no bounds, then how could anyone possibly say, yeah, the atonement of Christ is perfect and is infinite and eternal, but it can't do that.
It doesn't have the power.
It doesn't have the power to do X, Y, and Z. Wrong. That's wrong on its face. It truly is, in the most literal sense, limitless, if we allow it, if we fully take advantage of what is being offered us. It is not confusion or a mistake when Christ said, "Be ye perfect, even as I am perfect, even as your Father is
Well,
perfect."
I'll give you one better than that. He said, "Is it not written in Scripture, ye are gods?"
Exactly right. Not on our own accord, but through the grace and the mercy of Christ.
By nature of being,
yes,
by nature of being children of God.
yes. There is part of us that qualifies on its face to be like him. Now we sin, we fall, we make mistakes, so we lose that qualification. But through Jesus Christ, speaking of restoration, we can then be restored to that inheritance in which we are entitled if we understand how to apply and take advantage of what Christ has given us. Now that is real mercy. That is real grace. And that is a limitless atonement that truly is infinite and eternal, because I refuse to put Christ and his atonement in a box. I cannot say, well, his atonement can do all things except it can't do that, and it can't do that, and it can't do that.
It can't exalt you.
Exactly right. It's absolutely against gospel doctrine and truth to believe that you are not meant to obtain and to receive a real inheritance, a true inheritance of the Father. What does that mean? All that the Father has, just like Christ was able to attain, not through our merits, but through righteous choices, righteous covenants, and ultimately through the grace and mercy of Christ. I really do not understand for the life of me why that is difficult to comprehend and to be able to apply in one's mind.
Or why people fight against it.
Why would you fight against that idea? Why would you not entertain that and say, wait a minute, the atonement can do even more for me than I have previously
Christ
thought?
is offering the fullness of God's blessings,
Yes.
even to become as he is and as the Father is,
Well,
through his atonement.
And going back to the nature of God and kind of this first fundamental restorative truth that Joseph received through the first vision, I think it's hard for people to grasp that concept because they can't grasp who God the Father is. And the truth is, he is similar and like you. He is, period. He's just perfect, and he has perfect intelligence, and he knows how to apply that intelligence perfectly. But he has never intended for you to be limited in your intelligence, in your ability to apply the same.
And on the flip side of that same coin, understanding the true nature of God, it also is important for us to truly understand ourselves.
Yes,
and who we are.
Yep, that is the other side of that same coin. That's correct.
And I didn't mention this when we were going through the dispensation heads, the prophets of the dispensations, but every one of those prophets, those dispensations heads, had face time with God.
Yep.
Adam in the garden, Enoch. We know Enoch, ultimately was translated, but walked with God. Noah, the Genesis says Noah walked with God.
Yep.
Abraham supped with the Lord. Moses on
Mount Sinai.
Mount Sinai
Yep.
entered in the presence of the Lord. Christ is God.
Yeah.
But also was in the presence of the Father on the Mount of Transfiguration.
Yep.
And then Joseph Smith in the first vision.
Yep.
It's the true nature of God is the first thing to be corrupted
Yeah.
in apostasy.
And so the first thing that must be restored.
That's right.
Yeah.
There must be a prophet who understands the true nature of God and our true relationship with him. And then there must be those prophetic and apostolic witnesses to testify of those truths. And that truth has to be on the earth.
Because if you don't understand the true nature of God, his plan, and what he intends for you, you can never execute on that plan, take advantage of it, and receive all that the Father has in store for you to receive. You have to understand one to understand the other. You have to know God the Father to understand yourself and what you're truly capable of obtaining through Christ as the great mediator.
I feel like this is a good time for another Bruce R. McConkie quote.
Okay, This is a little long, but it's worth the read. So, as to this man, Joseph Smith, let us say, here is a man who was chosen before he was born, who was numbered with the noble and great in the councils of eternity, before the foundations of the world were laid, along with Adam and Enoch and Noah and Abraham. He sat in council with the gods when the plans were made to create an earth whereon the hosts of our fathers' children might dwell. Under the direction of the Holy One and of Michael, who became the first man, he participated in the creative enterprises of the Father. In his premortal state he grew in light and knowledge and intelligence, attained a spiritual stature which few could equal, and was then foreordained to preside over the greatest of all gospel dispensations. Here is a man who was called of God, as were the prophets of old, born among mortals with the talents and spiritual capacity earned in pre-existence. He was ready at the appointed time to perform the work to which he had been foreordained.
Wow.
If that's not just a beautiful summary of who Joseph Smith was premortally, who he was foreordained to become, and ultimately what he was able to accomplish in his short existence on this earth. I mean, that really is just a beautiful testimony of what he was able to obtain and to restore to the earth, because he was and should be revered by all Christians as Abraham is, as Moses is, as these other great dispensation heads are, because he is the one that has kicked off this final restoration of all truth that the Father has for his children.
What's mind-blowing to me here is that these dispensation heads, at least these dispensation heads,
if not more,
yep, they were in the council of the gods when the plans were made to create an earth whereon the host of the Father's children might dwell. Mm-hmm. So it was not just the Father, it was not just the Son, it was not just Michael. There were other great and noble
ones, yep,
spirits that were part of this council. And what's crazy to me, crazy in a good way, is that all of these individuals that were in this council, they all came down to earth. Mm-hmm. They were in the council of gods. Mm-hmm. They were elevated or exalted already. Yep. And they all condescended to earth to perform a service for the rest of God's children.
That's what I was going to say, was they were consecrating the truth, the light, the intelligence they had attained for the benefit of each one of us, because they knew they were capable, they qualified for, and were ready to perform that service for each of us. The greatest of all, obviously, was Jehovah, was Christ himself, who gave more than any so that we could all return and be with the Father. But each of these other men had a specific role to play to ultimately lead as many children as will be led back to the presence of the Father.
And so we learn that just as Michael condescended and became Adam and performed a great work, that the other prophets did as well.
Yeah.
And we can also learn, potentially, that you and I, while maybe not as great and as noble as they, but maybe we were involved to some small degree in some of these plans and carrying out work in this premortal life. Maybe we had greater identities in our premortal life than we give ourselves credit for.
No, I think it's absolutely a fact that all of God's children had a greater intelligence, a greater truth and light about them before coming to this earth. And that the sorrow, the sadness that the Lord feels in this life is so many of his children are not discovering and unleashing. They're not tapping into that potential within them.
I was reading Discourses of Brigham Young. He made a comment that was really interesting. He talked about how all the spirits of the children of God were pure.
Yeah.
And it's the flesh that corrupts and darkens the pureness of the spirit. But he also made a very interesting comment that as you get older and the body and the flesh starts to corrupt and decay, that the spirit actually strengthens.
So missionaries go after the 70 and 80-year-olds. they're primed for baptism.
Could be. But you certainly see that as you gain older, as you grow older.
Yeah. You get wiser. There's no doubt.
You get wiser and you certainly get more faithful
Yeah.
in who you are and what you have chosen to believe and be.
Even if you don't fully understand what you could be, who you are fully internally meant to be, you do through just life and the trials and the difficulties and surviving that long. If nothing else, there's just a natural progression of having an understanding of who you are, what you're capable of, and having more assurity and at least some basic truths about yourself. What we're saying is, though, there's even greater truth within you. There's even greater light and knowledge that is likely being not tapped into right now. You have not opened up that aspect of you, that part of you that you brought from your premortal state of being.
Well, and that's something that we are taught in the temple, that we have a past identity.
Yep.
Right? There is a past identity, a past name.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We receive a name associated with someone of olden times.
Yeah.
Signifying that we have a past identity.
Yeah.
And it's greater.
Yeah.
Than,
it's a
than
glory.
we think.
Yeah. There's glory there. There's power there.
It's associated with
Yep.
someone who is great.
Yep.
Who is revered.
Yep.
So that should
embolden us.
Embolden us, and it should inspire us to really seek inside ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
and through prayer and revelation and the ordinances of the temple to really seek to discover who we really are.
Yeah. It is truly in its simplest form taking full advantage of the atonement, because much like in the scriptures and in the temple, in the endowment, where we see sin starts to cover, right? It starts to hide that true identity, who we really are, and that's, we do that ourselves. What did Adam and Eve do? They took fig leaves and they started covering themselves, right? They started covering their true, pure identity. And what the atonement seeks to do is get rid of that, purify that, clean all that up from out of you, so that you can truly start to see who you were and who you are meant to become, right? It is that bridge from the past to the future. And this is why living a repentant lifestyle every day is so critical, so that we don't lose sight of who we truly are, who we truly have been, and where we should be orienting our life to go, the future we should be working towards.
So sin is regression.
Yep.
When we sin, we step backwards.
Yep.
And that requires all the more restoration
Yep.
or forgiveness to even get back to where we were starting from. So the more we can avoid sin, the better off we are.
Yep.
The
The more we keep moving forward.
more we keep moving forward.
Yep.
Exactly.